Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the TRN ST5. This is the latest hybrid from TRN, and let me say, kind of a spoiler alert, well done TRN, well done. It's actually very gratifying to see how some of the more I'm not going to say established, or I'm not going to say budget, or I'm not going to say the more low-end brands, but it's nice to see how brands like KZ in the last couple of months have constantly been releasing well, single DDs mostly, but all of them of very nice quality. Obviously for what they are, you're not going to compare them to a you're not going to compare any of them to a Tory or something of the sort. But it's nice to see how KZ has done that, and it's nice to see how TRN is now following the same kind of footsteps and launching IEM after IEM, which is a definite improvement over the previous models. This time the ST5, as the usual for TRN, basic package, nothing really too fantastic or too dramatic. The IEMs themselves come over here. Let's not forget as well that we are talking about an IEM that costs roughly around $60 to $65 depending on the store. So the IEMs come over there. I'll show them to you in a second. And inside here it brings the cable, which is half decent cable. I just don't like the terminations on it, but the cable is half decent. It's not a bad cable, and it's modular, so it does allow for that. Obviously, it brings then plenty tips, the plug, the various modular plugs. Actually, you have all three of them. Okay, tips. More tips, some foams. Anyway, nothing was left to chance with regards to cable and tips. The only thing that I mention as a slight little detail that I would have liked to have seen something a little bit better is just this termination. And if I actually show it to you, it is really very poor quality, honestly. That's the only thing. Otherwise, everything else is fine. Okay, let me just put that aside there for a second. Listening was done, most of it was done with my NX7 Frankenstein hybrid connected up to my UA3. This combination works beautifully, honestly. If any of you guys have got an NX7 and you happen to have this particular dongle, give it a try. It works very nicely. I've tried it as well with the Abigail. Works pretty decent, although obviously the signal of the Abigail is a little bit less. With the Avani as well, the same thing, both of them from Venture Electronics. I've tried this with the BTR3. That works also pretty decently, and with the Acme, the Sound Magic, also works very nicely. The warmish characteristic of this deck in terms of its sound marries very nicely with the kind of neutral clinical sound this particular amp puts out, and the marriage of the two is spot on. Honestly, it's a really nice combination. Of course, it's a little bit awkward to carry it around on the outside and so on and so forth, but you know what, it is what it is. It's a nice combo, and I highly recommend it. Like I said, this was most of the listening done through here. I did some listening as well through my Qlix 5K. I apologize if there's a little bit of noise, but it's just so hot over here that I had to open up a window to just let things breathe slightly. A Qlix 5K, and I did a little bit of listening on my DX3 Pro. Anyway, let's get straight into this because this is going to be a relatively easy review. These are the IEMs, really nice, kind of a shell which is somewhat reminiscent of the BAX shell. Nice quality, nice weight, fits nicely. I'm using, as you can see, my faithful and usual KB Euro 7 tips. I just love these tips, and in this particular IEM it fits beautifully in my ears. Apparently this has got some sort of a venting system over there. okay, so I guess you'd call it a semi-open back. And yeah, that's it. I mean, fit in my case is perfect, no real issues. Isolation is spot on. And I think most people won't really have a problem unless you've got small ears. And yes, this isn't exactly a small IEM, let's put it that way. I mean, for the sake of comparison, let me just get here a Moondrop, the Chew. Okay, this is the Chew, and that's the TRN, and yeah, it's like a monster. It's like David and Goliath. It's a big IEM, but funny enough, and I guess it's down to the ergonomic design that TRN implements in the IEMs. They always seem to fit pretty decently. Okay, what is all this here? Well, this is what I want to call, or what I like to call, the evolution of a species, and I've used that terminology as well with regards to KZ, and this is definitely an evolution of a species. A species that began to carve its current, let's say its current format back in 2018, mid 2018. You got the TRN V80, which was well, a nice IEM for the time, decent construction, nice and small, fit very nicely. It was also a semi-open design on the back, as you can see. Let me see if I this is not being easy to, let me see, there we go, come on, focus, no, you don't want to focus, there you go, you can see those vents there. Anyway, and this was a 2+2 design, so two DDs plus 2 BAs, and look, for the time it was a decent sounding IEM. Obviously it had its flaws, and compared by today's standards, it's flawed. You know, decent V-shaped, good sub bass for what it was, decent slam, but of course BA timbre was very noticeable. It could get shouty and sibilant. Look, again, I repeat, for the time it was fine. That then was followed in late 2019, early 2020 by the V90, which is also a 1+4, as is now the ST5. This sported basically the same dynamic driver of the V80, the bigger driver, and then the changes occurred were mainly in the actual BAs being used. 1 second, let me just check out my notes so I don't mislead anybody. So the BAs used were now the 560 for the mids and the 319 for the highs. Also again a semi-open back design, and this, the V90, was a big evolution over the V80. Way more well-tuned IEM. Bass was good. Actually, if I have to say, all of TRN IEMs usually have a good bass. It can be more textured depending on the model, or less textured, but they've all got a good, fun, engaging bass. Bass is not an issue there. It's always relatively well tuned, excessively or not excessively. It's got decent texture. It's not the quickest bass in the world, but it's got that. It's nice, that nice, full, engaging fullness to it. Let's put it that way. And the V90 was no stranger to that bass. Mids were superior to the V80, although the upper mids and the treble could become a little bit fatiguing at times. But again, V90 was a major improvement on the V80, and I love it. And I've actually performed a mod on it to tame those upper mids, and the improvement is quite significant. It's not an easy mod to do, but it's a worthwhile mod. That then, in late 2020, early 2021, was followed up by the V90S, and this again, the BA count, or the number of drivers, increased. We now were at 1+5, so one dynamic driver, which is very similar to the dynamic driver used in the V90, and then the number of VAs, not only were they increased, No, actually the models maintained itself still. The same models were maintained in the V90. No, the changes in the models came in the VX. So yes, it was just basically an extra 560 that was added to the equation. And what did this all bring? Well, it made the V90 equally as fun and as engaging in the bass as it was. Great technicalities, but the treble was too much, and it kind of made the mids seem slightly recessed. One of the tips or hacks you could do to kind of tame all of that energy was to use foam tips like you see here, which I also used now, the two models, as you probably noticed. And the usage of the foam tips, brought down that excessive energy which it had, which is nice when you're listening to it at low volumes, but it's not nice when you actually start cranking it up. Becomes fatiguing. But yeah, the V90S was again an improvement over the V90. Better technicalities, better soundstage, detailed retrieval, and so on and so forth. When we talk about timbre and tonality and so on and so forth, this was not something which was always very correct, at least up to this point. It's overemphasized, so things sound again a little bit too metallic, a little bit too artificial. But I liked it. I particularly liked it, and for example, when I did review the VX Pro, I even mentioned that this was perhaps a better option than the VX Pro. Okay, so that's the V90S there. Basically at the same time, and it was a model which was mainly focused for the Far East. They came out with the VX, okay, which was in essence basically a V90S, but with yet another BA added to the equation. So it was now a 1+6, and it was also the first time they actually changed the model of the BAs. They maintained the 560, 3 pieces of those, and they changed the 319 to the 395. What was the sound characteristic of the VX, of the original VX? Bright, very very simple. Bright. It was really bright. It could be quite fatiguing after a while. Yes, it was again very well built, like the V90, the V90S. The build was not an issue. It had nice bass, great technicality. It was very dynamic, very resolving, but the excessive treble kind of made it fatiguing, at least for me, and I'm guessing I was not the only one. Perhaps for the Far East market, and because of the style of music that particular part of the world usually likes listening to, which is more vocal centric and so on and so forth. Maybe this was more well received and more, but in the Western world, it wasn't exactly a very successful IEM as far as I know. Anyway, so up to now, up to this part, so let's say 2021, the best model, even with its limitations, was the V90S, at least for me. Enter late 2021, early 2022, and the VX Pro arrives. And yet again, we have an increase in the number of BAs, and now it becomes a 1+8. However, the BAs maintain the models of the 395 and the 560, that's 4 pieces of each, but the biggest change now is to the dynamic driver, which is a CNT, a carbon nanotube driver. And yes, you do notice an improvement in the bass from the VX Pro to the VX, to the V90, to the V90, to the V90S, to the V90. You do see it's a big improvement in the bass. It's now got way more, for lack of a better word, oomph. It's got guts. It's like, if I was to make an analogy, this is more of an old school V8 engine kind of, and this is now a more modern LS or a V8 engine, or a more modern V8 engine, let's put it that way, with more high tech. The bass on this is amazing, amazing, amazing. Technicalities, everything is perfect. Where was the flaw of the VX Pro, in my opinion? It was in that area centered around 4, 5, 6, 7K, where things were just overly excessive in terms of the amount of energy, and when you cranked it, the scalability of it wasn't what we would ideally like, so it came too forward. It made things sound just too forward, too in your face, too much. Having said all of that, again, with some tip choices, and then if you want to EQ a little bit, it could be all tamed down. And I honestly, initially, I wasn't, as I mentioned just now, I wasn't exactly convinced, and I still preferred the V90S. But with time, and as I listened to it, this more and more and more, I got to see the magic of the VX Pro. And yes, the VX Pro is, if you don't have, let's forget these, if you don't have any of these, this is the one that makes sense, and you can get it sometimes now with some good discounts. The VX Pro was then subject to earlier this year to a special edition, the Year of the Tiger, and let me just say, I got 3 pairs. I bought 3 pairs of the Tiger edition. Not that I wanted to, but I bought because the first pair was flawed in one of the channels. So I got the second pair, that came fine, and straight away there was a difference in the way that the bass was tuned. The bump that was given to the mid bass in the VX Pro, the standard edition, on this one was slightly subdued, as was the energy in that 3 to 7, 8K area, slightly lowered. And what that made was simply a much easier to listen to earphone. Out of all of these, undeniably this is the best one. So definitely an evolution, as you can see. Now, ST5, it's basically got, well, first of all, in terms of what it contains inside of its hardware, it's using 562 of the two BAs of those, and the 395 2 BAs of those. The change now again happens is in the dynamic driver, and the dynamic driver apparently here is the same dynamic driver used in the TA1 Max. And what does that mean? It means that the bass is fantastic, quick, textured, impactful, really nice. I mean, bass is not a problem. Transition into the mids, there's a little bit of a bleed, but nothing that is a deal breaker in my opinion. And then the way that then the pin again is done, and that whole area there between, let's say, 2 and 8K is put forward, is very nicely done. There's no peaks, there's no big valleys. There's an almost plateau kind of graph. I'll show you the graph later on. But it's been very nicely done, very nicely done. So what does this translate to? It translates to that the vocals have got, in my opinion, just the right amount of energy. Male vocals sound thick when they have to sound thick, sound open when they have to sound open. Female vocals are never shouty, they never want to kind of pierce your ears and make you bleed. Instruments, they sound very tonally correct. So in terms of timbre and tonality, this is, in my opinion, the best one out of all of these TRNs up to now. And highs, the extension that exists is just the right amount. It's not excessive, it doesn't have the excessive upper mids to presence area that you find in the VX Pros here, or let alone the VX. It's been very nicely done. In terms of technicalities, again, soundstage, it's wide enough. Imaging is probably its better trait. Imaging is very nice. Detail retrieval, like I mentioned, very nice. Tonality is very much correct. So, it seems that using less BAs, so bringing the numbers down in terms of the overall count of hardware inside, is the intelligent way to go, is the correct way to go. So a 1+4, in my opinion, is superior to the 1+8 of the VX Pro Special Edition or VX Pro, the Standard Edition. It is a nicer tuned IEM, in my opinion, more balanced, more coherent, equally as fun. There's nothing that it does that the VX Pro does better. It does everything that the VX Pro does, and it adds on it the fact that it's now more coherent in the way that it sounds. It's more balanced out. It scales better. There's no putting up the volume and voices come up too much, or treble comes up too much. As also the other thing that I did notice, and obviously it's down to the fact that the energy level of the BAs has been brought down, is the typical BA timbre, which obviously is felt in all of them, in some very much so. There, the same thing there, the same thing there, the same thing there. Probably out of these four, that's the one that's probably got a little bit less. These two, it was a big improvement in terms of the BA timbre, but it was still very much felt. This one is unquestionably the one that has the less feeling or the less sensation of that plasticky, metallic kind of sound. Very, very nicely tuned. I mean, I can only say well done, TRN. Honestly, well done. This, the Kirin, the TA1 Max, are perfect. Well, perfect. Take that with a grain of salt. Are perfectly well executed IEMs from TRN. The only reason why I do not mention the backs as another one is because the backs enters a price range where it is normal that I will demand way more than what it does, and the price of the backs is what kills it. The backs, if it was at the, let's say maximum $200 range, I would probably say yes, also worthwhile. But this, the ST5, for the 60 odd dollars that it costs, unquestionably a no-brainer. The VX Pro around the $95 as well, the same thing, and the Kirin for around $120, $125. They are, in my opinion, well balanced, well tuned, fun, engaging IEMs. In terms of the detail, which sometimes plagues a lot of these cheaper brands, which is quality control and so on and so forth. Honestly, with the exception of the situation that happened with me here on the special edition, all of these IEMs have got, my apologies, all of these IEMs here have got pretty decent quality control. The channel balance is almost always very spot on, and I've got multiple of them, so I can attest to that. I can confirm that it's not just I just got one pair and so on. The only one that I've actually only got one pair is the BAX, and my particular pair, as compared to some others that I've seen, it's got a lot more bass. So I'm guessing maybe I got one which was not badly tuned but overemphasized. Anyway, guys, I think that wraps it up. TRN ST5, well worthwhile. I mean, really well worth it. Compared to other things in the price range, I'm not going to really compare it to any single DDs or anything of the sort, because this for me is a hybrid. So if I'm going to have to compare it to another hybrid, if I compare it to, for example, to the ZAS, I probably will take this over the ZAS, because the ZAS is slightly darker than this, although that's a nice IEM. The ZAX is probably the one that simulates better the sound of the ST5 here. And that's basically it. You don't really have any other worthwhile hybrids at this price range that I think I should mention. Anyway, guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions, please feel free to ask, and I'll put in the second part of this video, I'll put in the graphs showing just the overall performance of the IEMs in terms of what graphically they are giving me. Alright, anyway, take care, bye bye. Hi guys, as promised, here is the section where I talk to you about the graphs that I measured of all these the TRN IEMs that I was using in this comparison, and we start off straight away with the ST5. As you can see, not a bad graph at all, not a bad graph at all. Okay, we have a little bit of a bump here in the mid bass, but nothing that's too offensive. It's got a good amount of bass, and you feel it and you hear it. The bass is quick. It's got a nice dynamic feel to it, as I mentioned in the review. The pin again is okay. I mean, I would have liked it to have peaked at 2 or past 2, but it's fine. The way that then it's almost nice and smooth, dips at 5, so no sibilance. This is a couple of related peak, and then it's got some decent extension. So overall, in my opinion, a nicely done tune. That now I will put other ones for you to compare. That when, for example, we take the V90 and we put the V90 there, we can see straight away, yes, okay, in terms of the bass, almost almost the same kind of response, although the bass on the ST5 has got a different quality altogether. But the V90 you can see is way more energetic, way more gonna jump in your face if you're not careful with what kind of music you listen to. You can actually see that it's very much the same sort of curve, it's just less energy from one to the other. Okay, this is the V90S, which as I mentioned was for quite some time one of my favorites. The problem with the V90S was the amount of energy that it had up top here, which just made things a little bit too artificial. And although the difference in this 1.5 to 5K area is not as, is not that big, you do notice that it's a little bit more energetic, obviously. And overall it's very much a V, the V90S, where the mids play second role to the rest of the signature. Okay, this is now the next one that I'm going to be showing you now is the VX Pro. Actually, let me show you the VX first. The VX is this one here. Okay, this is the VX, which when graphically you look at it, you see a lot of similarities. However, when you actually listen to the VX and compare it to the ST5, it's two very different sounds. The ST5 sounds way more fuller, way more engaging. Tonality is way more correct than it is on the VX. The VX is definitely a bright IEM. And it's actually funny because, for example, let me just take you the ST5 out. And if I put the V90S, which was of the more or less the same time, you would assume by looking at this that the V90S, the yellow graph, would actually be even more bright than the VX. And no, it's actually the opposite. The VX for some reason just sounds brighter, just sounds more, it's not even energetic, it's just bright. It just sounds significantly brighter than the V90S. Okay, let's take this out. Let's now put, this is the VX Pro, and this is the VX Pro, the Tiger Edition. Okay, so let me actually change the color of the Tiger Edition. There we go. Alright, one is the VX Pro and one is the VX Pro Tiger Edition. And as you can see, it's what I had mentioned when I actually did the review of one and the other, is although there isn't a big difference, okay, this difference here of 2 dBs across the board, I noticed it on all of the Tiger Edition versions that I got. So the Tiger Edition is definitely more laid back slightly as compared to the normal VX Pro, and this energy at 5K, which can be problematic because it's just down a notch, it is much nicer to handle as compared to the ST5. There we go. They are very similar, as you can see, very similar. The difference being is that this area here, which was the problem area of the VX Pro and of the Tiger Edition, has been significantly subdued or relaxed, and obviously you can hear straight away that it's a way less fatiguing signature, much more engaging, much more satisfying to listen to the ST5. I mean, I have to admit, I've been listening to the ST5 a lot because I really thoroughly enjoy it. I was really not expecting it to be as good as it is. One other IEM that I also mentioned in the review and that I'm just going to show you compared to it is the ZAX, which, as you can see, although more energetic, yes, than the ST5, it's more bearable to listen to this than to the V90 or even the V90S. Actually, if you look at the curve of the ZAX from KZ, and I'm just gonna show you here with the VX Pro Tiger Edition, you can see the similarities. Very similar, very similar. The thing that I think I like more and I enjoy more in the VAX, in the ZAX, sorry, is the fact that it's pin after 2K, which just makes things more tonally correct in my opinion. But overall, you can see that the ZAX from KZ and the ZX Pro Tiger Edition are very, very similar as compared to what we want to know, which is the ST5. As you can see, a lot of similarities. The ST5 is just more relaxed. And it's like I said, I would have liked the speaker to have been a little bit more forward, but honestly, it's been so nicely done across the whole board that it's not that bad. I mean, everything sits within a window of roughly 9 dBs, which is pretty decent. It's pretty decent. Okay, and the other one which I actually didn't mention during the review, and I should have, just so many, is this. And for those of you that don't know what this is, simple. This is the KB Ear Robin. Very, very similar once again to the ST5. The Robin suffered from being a little bit too dark, because this lack of energy, yeah, is very noticeable. Okay, the speak should have been a little bit more there to the right, but anyway, but you notice that there's a lack of sparkle, you know, the twinklies and the sparklies, like I usually call. But yeah, that's basically it. So yeah, guys, TRN ST5, nice enough signature. It's not offensive in any way, at least in my opinion, and sounds good. All right, take care, bye bye, see you soon.